Hello again, this is Tony Wright, First Love Christian Church of FLCC and A.B. Wright Ministries. This is, the 90-day Bible study. We're on day 25 and we're in 1 Kings, 7th chapter, 38th verse through the 16th chapter and the 20th verse. Oh my. We left off, Solomon had just finished having the temple built and he was working on his house. Now, remember, it took 7 years to build the temple. And now it'll take 13 years for him to finish this house. And like I was saying, when you look at the detail in the temple, oh my goodness. This dude right here, boy, this right here is the king of bling. You hear me? This cat had so many brass vessels made that they couldn't even count the number of brass vessels or couldn't weigh them. The Bible said, the Bible said that they were exceeding many. You know what that means? Just too much. Then all the other vessels that went into the temple, for the altar and the table and bowls and candlesticks and lamps and tongs and basins and doors for the holy place, all of that gold. And they put all the dedicated items in the house of the Lord and had the Ark of the Covenant brought up to be placed in the temple. And then they had a huge feast. Solomon, he held a feast for all the people. And then he spoke before the people. Now, Solomon said that David had it in his heart to build a house for the Lord. And God knew that it was in his heart. But the nations around were always in conflict with Israel. So David was just not able to build it. And God had told him that his son would build it instead. And boy, did he ever. This was a place. Do you hear me? And he prayed before the Lord. Solomon. He prayed that, and then he praised God because he said that there was none like this God. And that he was a God that keeps his word. And he's merciful to his people. And Solomon asked God to continue to look out for these people. And if they fall short, but if they acknowledge their wrong and reach out to him, to please hear their voice. And if they sinned against their neighbor, or if they were defeated by their enemies because of their, sinfulness and wrongdoing, but if they would turn back to God and confess to God and pray to please hear them and forgive them. And boy, did you read that prayer? Boy, that's a prayer right there. You hear me? That's a moaning prayer. I ain't talking about mourning as in AM. I'm talking about moaning as in Yeah, buddy. Listen to this. If they sin against thee, for there is no man that sinneth not, and thou be angry with them, and deliver them to the enemy, so that they carry them away captives into the land of the enemy, far or near. Yet, if they shall bethink themselves in the land, whether they were carried captives, and repent, and make supplication unto thee in the land of them that carried them captives, saying, God, we have sinned and have done perversely. We have committed wickedness, and so shall return unto thee with all their heart and with all their soul in the land of their enemies, which led them away captive, and pray unto thee toward their land, which thou givest unto their fathers, the city which thou hast chosen, and the house which I have built for thy name. Then hear thou their prayer, and hear thou their supplication in heaven, thy dwelling place, and maintain their cause, and forgive thy people that have sinned against thee, and all their transgressions wherein they have transgressed against thee, and give them compassion before them who carry them away as captives, that they may have compassion on them. Boy, tell me this brother right here wasn't sending up some timber. Whoo-wee. Anyway, then he went on and he prayed a blessing for his people. And then they dedicated the temple. Now, up to this point, it at least appears as though King Solomon is on the right track. Both in his personal actions and in his actions as the leader of the nation. And God speaks to him a second time. Okay, remember when he was in Gibeon before, God had come to him and asked what he could give to Solomon. And Solomon asked for wisdom to rule his people? Good answer. Good answer. And so far, well, not too bad, right? So anyway, God tells him now that he's heard his prayers, and that if he will just walk in God's ways as David had, and walk with integrity, and follow God's commandments, and keep his statutes and judgments, and everything will go well with him and with the nation. Oh boy. But if he turns at all from God's ways and fails to keep God's statutes and judgment, and serves other gods and worships any other gods, then God will pull Israel out of this land that he's given them, and he's going to cast these people out of his sight. Boy, when you hear things like this, you just know that things are not going to go well. Now you know that God would not waste his time to warn somebody to follow him and not to serve other gods unless he already knew that they were heading for trouble. Well, then Solomon is exchanging gifts with Hiram as he completes the building of his house. You know, this is 20 years after he started the temple. 7 years on that, plus 13 on his house. Finally, everything is done. And Solomon gives Hiram, you know, the guy from Tyre that did a lot, provided all the wood and did a lot of the metal work. He gives him 20 cities as a present. And Hiram wasn't too pleased with these cities. But he gave Solomon what equates to more than 9,000 pounds of gold. What? What was that about? Boy, King Bling, did you notice where, you know, Solomon made a navy of ships? Can you imagine that? These dudes are still riding mules and camels, and King Bling has a navy. What in the world? Somebody better help me. Oh boy. And then Solomon gets a visit from the Queen of Sheba. Seems that she'd heard, you know, of the fame of Solomon and his knowledge about things pertaining to God. And she said that she came to test him with some hard questions. So she arrives, you know, with this full caravan, got all kind of stuff, spices and gold and precious stones. And then, you know, while she's there, he had the best of meals and provisions laid out for her. He laid it on heavy, you hear me? Now, she said that she didn't really believe all she had heard about him until she saw it for herself. She said that the half ain't even been told, that this guy's even wiser and more wealthy than what's being said about him. And King Solomon, of course, you know, he hyped it up, so he gave her everything she was asking for. Everything she asked for, he gave it to her. Looks like to me, though, that both of them are kind of laying it on a little thick, you know what I mean? Now, as you read through all of this, you know, gold and silver and brass and precious stones, it's kind of obvious that King Bling here has kind of drifted a little bit off course, you know what I mean? Now, I haven't seen where the people of Israel are so well off, just King Bling. It says that he exceeded all the kings of the earth for riches and wisdom. Now, the wisdom part, that's a good thing. But the wealthy part just seems a little bit problematic. Boy, and then it goes straight to the bell ringer. Ding, ding, ding. Problems. Listen here. It says that Solomon, in addition to being married to Pharaoh's daughter, he has women from many other nations that God has forbade them to marry into. And God had told them that if they do, they would be drawn away from God. And King Bling, he's got 700 wives and princesses and more than 300 concubines. Boy, shut the doggone book. This dude is toast. Do you hear me? He's done. It's just too late. And then you see that he's worshiping gods of everything. I mean, every nation of, he got a woman that, boy, I bet. Boy, his mind is far away from God. You can't be thinking about all that gold and women and silver and women and brass and women and precious stones and women and exotic animals and women and women and women. What in the world? Well, just as you would suspect, God paid old King Casanova Bling a little visit and told him that Israel is gone from this family. But only because of David, God would not take the kingdom during Solomon's reign, but he was going to take it during his son's reign. And he would not take it all, but he would leave one tribe under his son. Then the Lord stirred up Solomon's adversaries. Now remember when Solomon was dedicating the temple and he said that David was too busy fighting and defending Israel to build the temple? Well, maybe if old smooth operator had to fight a little more. No. But 700 wives though. Come on, man. That's where, where was his wise counsel? Maybe around 100 or so, somebody could have come up and said, sir, well, anyway. So out of these adversaries that God has raised up against King Solomon, one of those is a guy by the name of Jeroboam. And God had sent the prophet Ahijah to him and told him that God would take 10 of the tribes out of the hand of Solomon's son and give those 10 tribes to him. And God told Jeroboam that if he was to follow God's ways and keep his commandments and his statutes, then he and his reign would be blessed. And boy, King Bling, he didn't like that a bit. So he was looking to kill Jeroboam. So Jeroboam had to flee to Egypt, and he stayed there in Egypt until the death of King Solomon. So after 40 years of reign, King Solomon died, and his son Rehoboam replaced him on the throne. Now, Rehoboam had gone to Shechem. Boy, Shechem keep popping back up, don't it? As part of being installed as king. And Jeroboam and the people of Israel, all those northern tribes, came to visit Rehoboam and asked him to have the conditions they were living under ease a little bit, that they were living under some pretty harsh conditions as a result of what Solomon had in place. So Rehoboam told them to come back in 3 days and he would give them an answer. Then the new king, Rehoboam, went to his elder advisors and he asked how he should handle this request. Now these old men told him that if he's kind to Jeroboam and these people of Israel, that they will be servants to him forever. So all he needs to do, Rehoboam, is just do that, right? Nope. He goes and he asks the young bucks what he should do. And they told him that he should tell them that if they think things are bad now, that they haven't seen anything. That he's going to be far tougher than Solomon ever was. So the next day when they came back, he told them what the young bucks had told him. Now don't get me wrong here. I think all people of all ages have positive things to contribute to dialogue. You know what I'm saying? But when you get information from elders, that's usually not just what they're thinking, This often comes from, having, a been there, done that experience. I'm just saying. And I'm not just saying that because I happen to have a little gray hair myself. But I'm saying it because as time has passed in my life, many of the things that I was told back during my Rehoboam days have turned out to have been great advice. And it would have been even greater if I had had sense enough to listen to it. Anyway, Rehoboam, he didn't listen. And the next thing you know, bam, Jeroboam and all those 10 tribes, they rebelled. So Rehoboam, he sent his bag man, Adoram, who was, over there forced labor. He was kind of like their version of the Secretary of Labor. But he was just looking out for the interests of the state, and instead of the people. He was looking out for the state. And when he went to them, they stoned this dude to death. So then King Rehoboam, he hurried on over to his chariot and went back to Jerusalem. I think he might have left a pot on the stove or something. Yep, he was in a little bit of a hurry. So they left Jeroboam king. They made Jeroboam king over these 10 tribes in Israel, just like God had said. And Rehoboam, he went back to Jerusalem and he gathered his forces and he was preparing to go to war against Israel so that he could regain those other tribes. But God sent word to him that this thing was from him and that they should go back home. So they did. Well, now King Jeroboam went to work right away, building golden calves, setting up his own altars for sacrifice. And then he made whoever he felt like making into priests. And so God sent a messenger to warn them that they were going to reap destruction for his actions. Now, Jeroboam, when the messenger was telling what they did, what he was saying, he reached out and told him to hold the man, and when he reached his hand out, his hand withered. And then the altar split and ashes spilled just like the man had warned him was going to happen. So Jeroboam asked the man to ask God to restore his hand, and he did. Now, you just have to read what happened to this man of God as he was returning back to Jerusalem, though. He was doing fine at first. Then he had someone that told him that, somebody else had to do something else by telling him that the Lord had told them to tell him, boy, I done told y'all, listen, you can tell me all you want to about what God told you to tell me. Until God tells me, I'm just sitting right by the phone, baby. God knows my number. Let's get up out of here. Anyway, you just have to read about this flurry of kings that came after Solomon. And some of that is crazy stuff that they did. You hear me? Now, there was a king, Asa. He was one of the good ones. But before King Asa died, read about it, his dogs had gotten really bad. And then there was Zimri. He was only king for a week. He overthrew the king, took over the kingship. Then when they came after him, he set the palace on fire just to kill himself. Boy, this stuff right here is just too much. But you just keep reading this word. And I want you to get at least 3 other people that you know that'll benefit from this journey, right? And have them join in with us, right? And then you keep checking us out on your favorite social media platform. And by all means, tell your friends, tell your neighbors. FLCC, we're on the move, brothers and sisters. We're taking ministry back to the first love. See you again soon, though. Peace.